The grand Aurora Hall shimmered like a dream carved out of gold. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft reflections across the polished marble floor. The air carried a delicate mix of expensive perfume and fresh white roses, carefully arranged at every corner. A live
You look
orchestra
so
played a slow,
handsome.
elegant
And
melody,
you are as
filling the
beautiful
space
as
with a
ever.
sense of
I love
perfection.
these moments
Tonight
with
wasn't
you.
just any wedding, it was the wedding. The kind of event people would talk about for years. The bride stood gracefully on the elevated stage, her white gown flowing like a cloud, delicate lace tracing every curve. Her smile was practiced, perfect, almost too perfect. Around her, guests whispered, laughed, and admired the luxury surrounding them. But despite all this beauty, all this attention, there was one name people kept mentioning. Emma Laurent. At just 30 years old, she had built a financial empire that rivaled corporations decades older than her. Her decisions shaped markets. Her presence alone could silence boardrooms. And tonight, she was here not as the star, but as the bride's older sister. The doors of the hall opened quietly, heads turned instinctively. And then she walked in. Emma, dressed in a sleek black gown that hugged her figure with effortless elegance, her long dark hair falling smoothly over her shoulders. She didn't need to demand attention. She owned it. Every step she took was calm, controlled, confident. But tonight, she wasn't alone. Beside her walked a man no one recognized. He wasn't dressed poorly, but he wasn't extraordinary either. A simple black suit, clean, neat, unremarkable. And holding his hand was a little girl, 6 years old, with soft eyes and a quiet curiosity as she looked around the overwhelming hall. The whispers began instantly. Who is he? Is that her assistant? Maybe a driver? No, Emma wouldn't bring someone like that here. But the truth was far from what they imagined. The man's name was Daniel, and he did not belong to their world. At least not anymore. Daniel felt it with every step. The eyes, the judgment, the silent questions. His grip on his daughter's hand tightened slightly, not out of fear, but out of protection. She looked up at him, her small fingers wrapped around his. "It's okay," he whispered softly, offering a reassuring smile. But deep inside, he wasn't sure if it was. Emma leaned slightly closer to him as they walked. "Relax," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, steady. "You're exactly where you need to be." Daniel glanced at her briefly. There was something in her tone, something intentional. But before he could ask anything, a voice called out, "Emma, the bride." She stepped forward, her smile wide and genuine. "You're finally here." Emma's expression softened slightly. "Of course," she said. "I wouldn't miss this." The two sisters embraced briefly, cameras flashing in the background. But then the bride pulled back. Her eyes shifted, slowly, toward Daniel, and in that moment her smile changed, just slightly. Not enough for everyone to notice, but enough. "Emma," she said, lowering her voice. "Who is this?" Emma didn't hesitate. "My guest." The bride blinked. "Your guest." There was confusion in her tone, because Emma never brought unknown people to events like this. Especially not tonight, especially not here. Daniel gave a small, polite nod, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to, because already he could feel the distance, the invisible line between him and everyone else in that room. Across the hall, the groom stood surrounded by friends and business associates. He looked exactly how a man in his position should, confident, sharp, in control. His tailored black tuxedo fit perfectly, his posture straight, his smile effortless. This was his world, his moment, his victory. And for a while, everything was exactly as he expected, until he turned. At first it was just a glance, a casual look toward the entrance. But then his eyes stopped, locked, focused. On one person, Daniel, the change was immediate, subtle, but powerful. His smile faded, his shoulders stiffened, his breath slowed. "No," he whispered under his breath. One of his friends noticed. "What's wrong?" But he didn't answer. He couldn't. Because in that moment, the past had just walked into his present. And it wasn't supposed to. Not here. Not tonight. He took a step forward. Then, another. Drawn toward something he couldn't ignore. Guests began to notice. Something was off. The energy shifted. The music still played. But the room no longer felt the same. Emma watched him closely, her eyes calm, focused, as if she had been waiting for this exact reaction. Daniel remained still. He had already seen him, recognized him, but unlike the groom, he didn't react. Not yet. The groom finally stood in front of him, only a few feet apart, face to face. A long silence followed, heavy, uncomfortable, unavoidable. And then the groom did something no one expected. He lowered his head, slowly, respectfully. Gasps spread across the room like a ripple in water. And then he extended his hand. Daniel looked at it, then at him, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Before finally he reached out, their hands met, firm, deliberate, and in a voice barely above a whisper, the groom spoke. "Boss, boss." The word echoed louder than any music in the room. The bride's bouquet trembled in her hands. Guests stared in disbelief. Phones began to rise, capturing the moment, recording the shock. Emma smiled, just slightly, because everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Daniel straightened slightly, and for the first time since he entered the hall, something changed in his presence. The hesitation was gone, replaced by something deeper, stronger, authority. "You've grown," Daniel said calmly. The groom swallowed, his voice tight. I didn't expect." "No," Daniel interrupted gently. "You didn't." And that was the problem. Behind them, the bride stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Can someone please tell me what is going on?" That no one answered, because no one understood. Not yet, not fully. That they were about to. The silence in the hall felt heavier than anything before it. It wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating. Every guest stood frozen, their eyes locked on the same moment. The handshake, the bow, and that one word that shattered the illusion of everything they believed they understood. "Boss." The bride's fingers trembled around her bouquet as she stared at the two men in front of her. "Someone, please explain this," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. But no one moved, no one spoke. Because the truth wasn't simple, and it wasn't comfortable. Emma stepped forward slowly, her heels echoing softly across the marble floor. Each step she took carried authority, control, intention. "It's time," she said calmly. The words weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. They carried weight. The groom lowered his head, exhaling slowly, as if accepting something inevitable. "I say it," he murmured. All eyes turned to him instantly. The powerful man who, just moments ago, stood at the top of the room, now looked like someone carrying a past too heavy to hide any longer. "I wasn't always this person," he began. A few guests exchanged confused glances. "I didn't grow up with money. I didn't have connections. I didn't have a future anyone believed in." The bride shook her head, her voice breaking slightly. "What are you talking about?" But he didn't look at her. "Not yet. Years ago, I was nothing," he continued. "Debt, failure, rejection. It followed me everywhere. I lost opportunities. I lost respect. I lost myself." The room felt colder, more real. And then he paused, his eyes slowly lifting toward Daniel. "I met him." A ripple of shock spread through the crowd again. Daniel stood quietly, his hand still gently holding his daughter's. His expression remained calm, unreadable, but his presence now felt undeniable. He didn't see what everyone else saw. The groom said he didn't see failure. He saw potential. Emma crossed her arms slightly, watching the reactions unfold. He gave me a chance, the groom continued. When no one else would even listen, he invested in me. Not just money, the trust. The bride's eyes widened. No, that can't be true. But it is, Emma said firmly. Her voice cut through the doubt like a blade. You all see success, she continued, turning slowly toward the guests. You see luxury, status, titles, but you never ask where it comes from. She gestured toward Daniel. This man built more lives than you can imagine. Silence, heavy and undeniable. The groom swallowed hard. I wouldn't be standing here today without him. The bride stepped back slightly, her breath unsteady. Then why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice shaking. This time, he looked at her, and the guilt in his eyes said everything. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you'd see me differently, he admitted. That you would think I wasn't enough, that everything I built wasn't really mine. Tears filled her eyes. But it is yours, she whispered. You worked for it, didn't you? He hesitated. Yes, but I didn't start alone, Daniel finally spoke, and when he did, the entire room seemed to listen differently. Success is never truly alone, he said calmly. People just choose which parts of the story they want to remember. His daughter looked up at him, smiling softly. He squeezed her hand gently, a quiet reminder of what truly mattered. Emma stepped beside him. That's why I brought him here, she said. The bride turned to her, confused. You knew? Emma nodded. Of course I knew. A pause, and I also knew. That truth has a way of revealing itself. The groom exhaled slowly. I was going to tell you, he said, looking at the bride. After the wedding, when everything's settled. But you didn't, she replied. The disappointment in her voice cut deeper than anger. He lowered his gaze. No, I didn't. The room remained silent, watching, waiting. The bride took a slow step forward, her emotions visible now. Confusion, pain, realization. I judged him, she said, looking at Daniel. Before even knowing who he was, Daniel shook his head gently. That's human, he replied. We all do it. She swallowed, her voice soft. But that doesn't make it right. Another pause. Then she turned back to the groom. And you, she said, you hid something important. I know, he admitted, and I'm sorry. The words hung in the air. Real. Honest. For the first time, vulnerable. The bride closed her eyes briefly, taking in everything, letting the truth settle. And then she opened them. And I still choose you. Gasps filled the hall once again. The tension shifted, not gone but transformed. But from now on, she added firmly, no more hiding. The groom nodded immediately. No more hiding. Daniel watched quietly. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. Because he knew, everyone had a story they struggled to face. Emma smiled faintly, satisfied, not because of control, but because of clarity. The truth was out, and nothing was pretending anymore. The orchestra slowly resumed playing, hesitant at first, then stronger. Guests began to breathe again, to move, to whisper, but the energy had changed, forever. People who once ignored Daniel now looked at him differently, not because of his clothes, not because of his presence, but because of what they now knew. Respect. The real kind, the kind that couldn't be bought. Daniel looked down at his daughter again. She smiled, unaware of the complexity around her, but aware of one thing: her father mattered. And that was enough. He gently lifted her into his arms, holding her close, grounded, present, real. Emma turned toward him. "You didn't have to come," she said quietly. Daniel smiled slightly. "Yes, I did." She raised an eyebrow. "And why's that?" He glanced toward the bride and groom. "Because sometimes people need to see the truth to understand it." Emma nodded slowly. "Fair point." The bride approached Daniel one last time, her expression softer. "Now, thank you," she said sincerely, "for everything you did, even if I didn't know." Daniel shook his head gently. "You don't owe me anything, but I do," she insisted. "At least, respect," he smiled. "That's more than enough." The groom stepped forward as well, this time not as someone powerful, but as someone grateful. "I'll never forget what you did for me," he said. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then prove it," he replied. "Not with words, but with how you live." The groom nodded. "I will." And for the first time that night, it felt true. The wedding continued. The light still shined. The music still played. But the illusion was gone, replaced by something real, something deeper. And as Daniel walked slowly toward the exit with his daughter in his arms, Emma beside him, no one stopped them. No one questioned them, because now they understood. That power doesn't always look powerful. That success doesn't always speak loudly. And that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one no one notices at first. In a world obsessed with status, the quietest man can be the most powerful of all.